Have you ever wanted to be a warlord of the wasteland? Eke out a living in a small community on a well-traveled trade route, or just have enough of a portable store of wealth for small trades when lone wolfing it on the road after grid goes down? Pure copper can be a vital material for trade, and having it in a compact, attractive form like this could help you rebuild or just survive after the apocalypse. Hello, fellow mutants. After a collapse, regardless of the cause, once people are in a survival mode, the first thing you'll need, along with shelter, will be a secure source of water and food. Other priorities like medicine, weapons, and fuel will be high on the list as well. But once you've managed to eke out a living, being able to obtain things you need to thrive that aren't available for the taking from your surroundings will require a system of trade. Barter for key items like foods is vital, whether you're the one who is selling or buying. There's only so long you can eat cans of Beanie Weenie and remain in good condition after all. The bulky or perishable nature of foodstuffs and a need for like for unlike trade, however, poses a challenge when it comes to barter. By like for unlike, I mean you can't effectively trade green beans or chicken eggs to your neighbor who also has an abundance of green beans and chicken eggs. Perhaps they have something else you need, and maybe you can grow something that's different, but if you all live out in the boonies together, eventually the items you can obtain locally are likely to equal out between you and your neighbors. Your buddy across the way, if he's smart, will save the zucchini seeds from the vegetable you traded to him, and he'll be knee-deep in zucchini soon himself. Same goes for a shortage. If you don't have Band-Aids or shampoo, then your neighbors are likely in a similar boat unless one of them prepped much more than the others. The point is, straight barter of goods is not always going to gain you what you need, and that goes for the broader picture. If you're living in a settlement with others in the same predicament as you, scratching together a living, consider the downside of barter of goods. When you go to a flea market or a swap meet, think about how you can walk past rows and rows of things you don't want or need. Now imagine instead of the retired guy just spending all day at his booth with no sales, there's a family desperate for something, just trying to survive, trading unwanted goods like cracked plates or faded Funko Pops for vital needs. There are other options. Ammunition is often suggested as a currency for trade. Generally, this could be a good idea. However, some communities might restrict bringing weapons and ammunition through the gates or could outright confiscate them for use by local security forces. I have also never liked the idea of advertising that I have enough ammo to give away in any case. There are those who might say that people in a collapsed nation might decide to respect the old currency, despite the old science fiction trope of people burning dollar bills to stay warm. That they might trade in dimes based off a silver percentage, or perhaps they'd even accept quarters or dollar coins in some attempt to restore the world that came before. After all, I've done videos of how things can have perceived value, even baseball cards. Wouldn't the currency of the United States still have some perceived value? Maybe, but I would not bet heavily on it. As I pointed out in my Hard Times Tokens video, when currency was no longer available due to shortages, people turned to another alternative. And that brings us back to copper. A universally appreciated and ancient form of currency can overcome the issues I've mentioned. And no, after a grid-down event, there's no more electricity to run power-hungry server farms, so I wouldn't count on something like Bitcoin to be that currency. That's frankly very silly. Now, if we live through a dystopian cyberpunk-type future, then sure, Bitcoin could have its place. But that's not the scenario I'm presenting here. We're talking about an apocalyptic event that makes power something you'd get locally at best, with solar in your backyard, for example. But with all the networks and grids we rely on in our modern world, unavailable. Other precious metals like gold and even silver to a degree may also be difficult to use as a universal currency. They should still retain their value and be sought after a collapse, but their scarcity makes practical and widespread use difficult, especially gold. I'm sure silver and gold stackers would like to be the richest men on Earth after a collapse, but that's not the reason I stack copper. I don't do it so I'll be rich. I do it so I'll have something with intrinsic value to trade a 1 ounce pure bullion round for everyday items that cost around $2 to $5. No need for a coin collector's handbook on dates and silver percentages and dimes from 70 years ago. Just pure, nicely formed 1 ounce copper rounds or bars. Even in the so-called stacking community, how many stackers have enough gold that they could part with it easily, and how many buyers would exist to trade with them, unless they were to deal in tiny fractions of the metal, such as in goldbacks, assuming it can be extracted at all, if need be. I hold the belief that silver and gold will indeed be valued up the chain, and could make those stackers rich, but that they run an almost equal risk of being dramatically devalued compared to their worth today by desperate people with no alternatives in a post-apocalyptic scenario. In other words, gold may not buy $2,000 worth of goods in today's prices, especially in the years immediately following a collapse when just getting by will be the main goal. Similarly, some will give up their $30 silver 1 ounce rounds quickly for things worth substantially less in today's terms because they have no smaller unit for trade. And a few will surely end up trading that gold coin even for enough food and water just to get them by a few days. Or perhaps a weapon, or a simple tube of antibiotic ointment to fight off an infection. To be sure, copper runs a risk of not being valued to the degree where someone is willing to part with something valuable, even if you present them with a large sack of copper rounds. And that's perhaps where having some silver and even gold in your stack can help you hedge your bets. Copper for everyday trade, however, is democratic with a value that is evident to many. In the absence of complex financial systems, its relative abundance can be an equalizer, a currency that everyone can understand, obtain, and appreciate. Even without mining for it, there is enough copper in the world around us that has been made into wire, pipes, and other materials that, if some day Immortan Joe, desert warlord, wants his own coinage, he can begin to collect, melt, and mint it, just as emperors and kings of old once did, without flooding the market. Copper is not just for trading, though. It can be the backbone of societal resurgence. With this metal, one may forge tools to help rebuild what was lost. One can build components for shelters or even treat injuries. While silver and even gold is used to some degree in electronics, primitive machines and switches of a world getting back on its feet would have less of an emphasis on the use of scarcer silver for practical purposes like this. Copper would be king, again, due to its relative abundance. This is why I see it as a good base currency. Having it be pure copper instead of an alloy like brass or bronze means it's easier to use without further processing in other applications, as I've covered here before extensively. Therefore, it has intrinsic value. Think of silver or gold. If they are pure, then if the owner of a gold or silver bullion piece desires, it could be crafted into jewelry. In fact, there are gold bracelets you can buy so you can carry your gold around with you, somewhat inconspicuously while still showing it off, if that makes sense. Not sure I'd do that myself, but the point remains that pure bullion, whether it be gold, silver, or copper for that matter, gives the correct impression that you have something in a pure state that you could do anything you want with. Making or separating alloys of copper and other more common metals to make your own coinage makes less sense after grid down, where complex chemical reactions or high melting temperatures may be required and could take excessive fuel or advanced machinery as requirements. Pure copper is the way it was done in ancient times for a reason. It's easy to form. Going with an alloy also means such coins are much less suitable for using in any other application, since the alloys have different properties, such as less electrical conductivity, are less malleable, have higher melting points, and release toxic gases when melted at that. If you are starting up a new currency, you don't want to begin with the impression that the value of your coinage is diminished or similar to something with close to no intrinsic value like cupronickel coins from pre-collapse nations. So, how would you establish copper as your currency in a post-collapse society? Well, you could have a pile of copper rounds from a place like Liberty Copper, which would give you a nice start. But if you live in a settlement with dozens or even 100 or more residents, you'll probably need to start minting your own new rounds at some point. The first step you could take would be sourcing raw material. As I mentioned before, scavenge abandoned structures, electronics, unused wiring along roadways, and wherever else you can find copper. Smelting is the next move. Melt down the scrap copper to form ingots. The temperatures to melt copper are very achievable even with limited technology. This process not only purifies the metal, but also allows one to standardize the currency's weight and purity. If you can't reach the required temperature, which is easy to remember for survivalists, it's 1984 Fahrenheit, or a little over 1,000 Celsius, you can always anneal copper with far lower temperatures, as I have illustrated here on my channel with little more than a chimney used in a charcoal grill. Heated and annealed copper can be reworked to a point where it could be annealed again and eventually stamped into a coin. Crafting the currency would be a community effort, or for someone who has developed the skills and accumulated the tools to do so alone. I've seen videos of primitive coin presses made with tools that could be gathered post-apocalypse. Whether it's rounds or bars you want to craft, however, consistency would be key. Engraving distinctive markings that represent your area or community could help to prevent counterfeiting. Rigorous testing of the final product would be wise. You'd be recreating a craft that has been lost to the industrial age and left hundreds of years in the past, with the exception perhaps of your local Renaissance festival. You should verify the weight and purity of each piece. A standardized currency with reliable characteristics would be what builds trust and ensures a smooth transition to a new system. Communication would be vital. Engaging with any community leaders in discussions about the benefits of a copper-based economy might take time and convincing. In the end, talking about the benefits of such a shift would ensure everyone understands the importance of this transition and the intrinsic value of the copper round or bar. Start small. Encourage local transactions using the newly minted copper currency. This could include barter markets, services, or even basic goods. Familiarize everyone with the practical use of the currency. You could even start to do this well before a collapse or a crisis hits. Right now today, for example. Softening people in your area up to the idea of a pure copper bullion-based currency with silver and gold above it is achievable. As I've said here before, I give out a single copper round on top of regular tips of 15%, just to get people used to the idea. And it always brings a smile and a question when I'm around to see them take it. The coinage of your post-collapse society could also play off copper's durability and resistance to corrosion. It's not just a currency, it's a symbol of resilience. Look at this copper piece that is over 1,000 years old. It still holds a strong image after all these years. Now, the big moment. Announce the official launch of your copper-based currency. Declare it as the standard for all local transactions with silver and gold above it. This marks the beginning of a new way of trade, where you can bring a handful of metal to trade for the things you need, rather than a box of chickens in cages on your back or heavy sacks of rice. Remember, the transition to copper as the foundational metal for a new currency isn't just about money. It's about rebuilding a way to trade from the ground up, based on a currency with intrinsic value. Copper rounds and bars can be more than currency. They can be a new beginning. So, what's in the way other than people resistant to adopting it? Other considerations must be made, such as controlling trade routes to secure a community's stability. In a world where every resource counts, regulating the flow of goods and currencies becomes important. Imagine a scenario where your community has its own copper coin, but other similar coins from far-off lands are flooding in. This is something no doubt that ancient cultures had to deal with as well. How do you ensure economic control and stability so you don't encounter inflation when these coins come into trade? First, you might want to identify strategic locations along major trade routes. These could be choke points, natural barriers, or even abandoned settlements. These positions offer control over the movement of people, goods, and currencies. Establish outposts and watchtowers at these key locations. These could serve as both deterrents and checkpoints. Anyone passing through would need to adhere to your community's rules, including the use of your official currency. Ensure that foreign silver, gold, and copper coins are exchanged for your currency. This could provide a new source for coinage as your community expands. It's not just about currency, it's about securing vital resources too. By controlling trade routes, you control access to valuable commodities, creating a powerful leverage point. Allow merchants and travelers with items to trade to pass through in exchange for essential goods that benefit your community. This reciprocity could foster positive relationships and ensure a steady flow of necessities. Be prepared for potential threats. Your control of trade routes could attract attention, so you need to bolster your defenses and consider forming alliances with neighboring committees or fortifying key locations with regular patrols. Patrols would not only deter bandits and opportunistic rivals, but also provide valuable intelligence about the surrounding areas. Making copper, silver, and gold your currencies and controlling trade routes isn't just a matter of economic dominance, it's a survival strategy. By securing trade routes, you're not only regulating currencies, you're safeguarding your local area's future. Well, that's all I have for today. Until next time, it's Copper Mutant, signing out.